Hello, my paper peeps. Today I want to share with you the ultimate guide to using distress paint for beginners. Now we're going to keep it simple, but I want to introduce just some of the techniques that I think you will really love to use in your crafting today. Now, there are so many different mediums. There's so many different papers that you can use this on, but because it's a beginner's guide, I don't want to overwhelm you with too much stuff. I want to keep it simple, but allow you to create beautiful pieces of artwork with really minimal effort. So here we go. Now, because there are several different types of paper out there that you can use distress paint on, I'm going to use two today. One is craft paper and the other one is watercolor cardstock. And the reason why I'm using it on these two is because distress paint loves watercolor paper and craft cardstock. And really, I just want you to be successful when you use this. So let's get started. Now, some of the videos that are out there usually show you techniques on card bases or tags. Today, because my crafting community and I are in the Java journals, I'm going to demonstrate all the techniques on art pages, which are pages that you can actually place in your DIY journals as art. So right now the journal we're in is the Java journals, and it has this removable DIY binding system that at the end of your journaling journey, you can actually replace those binding strips with art pages that I'm going to show you today. Now, the first technique I'm going to show you is on watercolor cardstock. And some of the things I want to go through with you are pretty much the properties of distress paint. And one of them is the fact that it's a little less viscous than regular acrylic paints. So when you do apply it, it actually produces this very smooth application and it's not very textured, which allows you to do so much more like stamping and all these other techniques that you'll probably be interested in seeing over the course of the next few videos. This type of acrylic paint is also water reactive, so you can just use it as is, or you can add water. Now, I'm going to share with you what it looks like in its purest form and how to apply it to your projects. Okay, in this first technique, we're going to be using gathered twigs. And the thing with these paints is that you want to give it a good shake before you apply it. And really, in this first technique, we're just painting it on with a paintbrush. Here, I'm using a flat acrylic brush to apply the paint. And you can see the paint goes on quite smoothly, but you can also see that it's opaque. You can't see the white underneath, which I really love with this type of paint. Now, if you find that that color may seem too opaque or even just too strong, you can also water it down, and that thins out the paint. But the one thing that I love about this paint is that even though it's thinned out, it still maintains its true color, and it's still opaque. As you can see here, it's thinned out, and so it gives you kind of a lighter brush stroke effect. Now, the one thing I love about these paints is that they actually have matching distressed inks to go along with it. So if you like that brush stroke effect, but then you kind of want to blend the background into, say, the white cardstock, then you can actually use the matching distress ink and then distress around the edges. And because the paint is dry, the distress ink will not affect the actual paint itself, which I love. Now, this is as simple as it gets. And then what you can do is just add your favorite stamp to it, and you're done. Your favorite sentiment, and you're done. And usually I'll either use archival ink, which is permanent and waterproof, or for a more detailed appearance or detailed look, I'll use a VersaFine ink. Now, the important thing to remember with VersaFine is that it is a pigment ink, and so it takes a lot longer to dry. And yeah, I've made the mistake in some of my crafting projects here when I was just fooling around is I actually used the VersaFine ink and forgot that it does take a little longer, and so I ended up smudging it, but that's not a problem. You can always cover up your mistakes with butterflies. That's how I do it. If you're new to my channel and you see a lot of butterflies in my crafting, it's because I use them to cover up my mistakes. And while we're on the topic of butterflies, I just want to let you know, because this ink is permanent, you can use things like these rub-on stickers and it doesn't affect it at all. And because we're in the Java journals and there's a little bit of blue and turquoise in there, I'm just going to add a little bit of Stormy Sky and your tumbled glass, and just kind of mix those two together. Now with this whole idea of layering, I just want to show you how, if I do this dipping and swiping effect, how it affects the paint underneath. And because it's wet, you can actually go in with a rag and remove any of the paint that you don't want in the area. And because the paint underneath is permanent, it's dried, it doesn't affect it at all. And that's the beauty behind this paint, is that it's you can work with it while it's wet, but then once it's dried, it's completely permanent. So again, you can just layer colors right on top of one another without affecting any dried areas. Now just make sure that you dry, either air dry it or use a drying tool. Like here I'm just using my embossing tool, especially if you want to layer colors on top without the actual color that you're adding to be changed in any way. And the next technique that I'm going to be showing you is what is called marbling. And I'm using a little bit of gathered twigs and your brush corduroy. And I learned this from the expert himself and the creator of the distress paint, and that's Tim Holtz. And he uses more of a swiping action, dipping and swiping action to create this marbling effect. Now, the first thing you want to do is actually spray it and give it a little bit of water so that it's not so concentrated. And then with a dabbing motion, swiping motion, you can pick up this pigment just like this. Add a little bit of water and you can continue to do that to the paper. And I'm just going to do it on another piece of paper here. And the one thing to do is, the key is actually to spray a little bit of the cardstock, and kind of like what you would do with marbles on a plate, you want to kind of roll the paint along the surface of that cardstock. So moving it along the cardstock, making sure all the areas are covered. And then you can let that dry. And then if you partially let it dry, then some of those areas will set. And then you can spray it again and move it around. And this will give it that marbling effect. And I think the whole idea of dabbing and drying will continue to kind of give you areas where there's darker marbling and then lighter areas of marbling. And then take your heating tool and you can dry those areas. And I don't want to waste any of this, so I'm just going to take a couple more of these sheets of watercolor paper and I'm just going to clean up my mess. And really, I'm not doing much cleanup because I'm going to use these as card fronts or just more art pages within the journal. So yeah, I'm just going to do it like that and just kind of work the paint along the cardstock, moving it around. And again, you can see how saturated, watered down the paint is there, but it's still opaque. And you know, when you have a glass board like this, all you need is a cotton sheet to just wipe it clean, and then you're ready to go. And again, because of that smooth consistency, once you've laid it down, it's so easy to stamp right on top of the paint. When it comes to stamping on this type of acrylic paint, the best is archival ink because it's permanent and it's waterproof as well. And with that being waterproof, if you decide you want to add more color, use water, the images won't move at all. And I'm just going to use, I don't know, I'm just going to add some of my ephemera from the paper line, staple it onto there, and then maybe stamp a little bit more just to fill up some of those gaps. Okay, the next technique I want to show you is on kraft cardstock. And there's something special about this paper, and I don't know what it is. All I know is that it just produces really great images, especially when I use it in this technique. Now, I'm just going to coin this. I just call it the phantom effect. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But I love the idea of having text kind of shine through paint. I like that look, and I've seen it a lot in scrapbook paper, and I just wanted to recreate that here. So what I'm going to do is just take this stamp here, and I'm going to use, again, my archival ink because it's waterproof and permanent. And we're going to stamp that image right onto the craft paper. Now I'm going to have to turn this around here because I need to line this up really well, and right now the camera is right above my head, and if I don't turn it around, my head's going to actually be in the way. So this is kind of the best way for me to line it up so that it's in line with the paper. Let's see here. Okay, that's the best I can do considering the camera is like right above me. But here we go. So that is permanent, and you can dry it if you want. It should be fine. Now, again, I have this tendency to want to frame my images by inking the edges. I don't know why that is. Like I said, it just allows me to take a look at what I have and where I want to work from there. You probably want to wait till the end to do any inking of edges because, like I said, if you are to use any water on this, it's going to bleed out on you. Now I'm going to take a brayer, and this is a neat little tool that I love to use on some of my crafting projects, and the reason being is that it just gives you kind of this brush stroke effect that I really like. Now the key with using a brayer is that you have to not push down on the ink. You want to roll it and lift in order to pick up the paint. So it's this rolling and lifting action. And then you just kind of run it across the page like this. Now, this in itself, I think, is perfect. What I want to achieve with this brushing effect with the brayer is exactly what I needed, is this whole idea of the paint just covering up the text, but enough that you can see the text shine through. But then I thought, oh, maybe it needs more. Maybe I don't want so much text shining through. So I added a little bit more, and you know what? I think I liked it when I just had the one layer. So if you're happy with something, just leave it. Yeah, you know, trust your instincts and go, okay, you know what, that was good. See, now that I look at that now, I'm like, oh, it's too much paint. And I don't want to spray on top of it because I kind of like that blotchy look. If you spray water on that, it'll just bleed out and then you won't have that text shine through. Now, I thought, well, let's add more dimension. And so I ended up adding a little bit of brushed corduroy to it, just to see if I could get a little bit, kind of more of a whitewashed look. And to me, it's okay, but yeah, I could have done with just the one layer. Again, use your instincts. If it looks good, just leave it. Now, the one thing with using a brayer is that the paint dries extremely fast. So if you want to add water droplets, you kind of have to act really fast. In this example, I was able to lift the water off of the paper, but it didn't create the water droplets that I really wanted. Again, like I said, the brayer, you got to make sure that you act really fast. And to lift those water droplets off the page, all you need is, again, that cotton rag, and you just dab it. Dab it, and that will lift the paint, the undried paint, off of the paper. Or you can use just a paper towel. And you know what? I'm not going to waste. This is really good paint that can create so many other different background, so I'm just going to kind of pick those up because I don't want to waste the paint that I had laid down initially. And then I can just kind of spritz that and move that around, and you know what, that's for a background that I can use later on. And then you can pretty much stamp on top of it. There's so many more things you can do to this, but because it's the ultimate guide for beginners, let's just stay here. Let's like absorb this, enjoy it, and then you know what? I'm just going to finish it off with stamping. Okay, the last technique is using stamps with the paint. And if you don't know me, I am actually addicted to these brushstroke stamps. And I have them in the wooden ones, and I also have them in these cling form stamps. And I just found that they're perfect as a background for your text. And here I'm going to show you how to use the paint as a resist on your cards. And I'm actually going to use old paper distress paint here. And we're going to take the brayer, and I'm just going to run it across the stamp here. Make sure that when you do use this on stamps, you don't press hard because you don't want it to go into the crevices. You just want it on the stamped portions of your image. So you can just kind of keep it like this if you just want to, use your brayer and stamp paint on your cards. I mean, use different colors and you can just kind of do that. And that in itself is beautiful. And you don't have to do anything else to that. Heck, you know what? You can take some of the other techniques that we did before and again, use your stamps, use different paints and stamp on top of the backgrounds that you had just laid down. Now, one of my favorites here is this stamp collection right here from Tim Holtz. And again, I will put a link to everything that I use here in the description box below. But this one I really love, and I'm going to show you the resist technique with this one. Again, I used the distress paint in old paper, and I just run it along just lightly along the face of the stamp there, and I'm just going to press it like I would a regular stamp. Just making sure that you apply paint with every stamp. Now, if you're wondering how to clean a brayer, you can just use a wet cloth to remove any existing paint on there. But what I like to do is to just remove it from the handle like this, and then use soap and water to clean it off. Now, before we do anything else, you want to make sure that this is dry. Because it's going to be used as a resist, it has to be dry. Now, the difference between distress stains like this, spray stains, and distress paint is that the distress spray stains are translucent. So this is where the whole resist idea comes in. It's just great, and I'm going to show you here. Now I'm just going to take my paint splash box, or my shoe box I guess, and I'll just spray the card with distress spray stain. And you can see how I just saturate the whole card. Now, watch what happens here, which I find so interesting, and I just love the way it actually turns out. Now, in real time, I'm not speeding this up at all. You can see the resist starting to resist. It doesn't want to have anything to do with that spray stain. And so you can see how it's just coming through. And look at that. I haven't even dried it yet. Isn't that beautiful? And as you dry it, you can see how the paint actually resists the stain. It's just one of my favorite techniques. If you're new to my channel, my name is Christine, and I love to create DIY journals that allow me not just to scrapbook in and add photos, but allows me to also journal my thoughts and feelings, and in this journal, to actually add art pages without having any warping of the journal itself because you have these individual art pages. And so if you're interested in this DIY journal, I'll put a link to this in the description box below. I'll actually put a link to the whole playlist because there's so many different techniques that I use within the journal that I really want to share with you. I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you want more tips and tricks on how to jazz up your scrapbook journals, then you'll probably want to watch this video here. If you want to try this DIY journal, then you'll probably want to watch these videos here. So take care. I have all the information in the description box below. Let me know if you need anything. And you know what? Have a fantastic week. I hope to see you in my other videos. Bye!